However, first responders located Mike Brown completely isolated on the opposite side of the avenue, violently separated from the rest, giving the chilling impression that a predator had intentionally stalked him through the shadows. The smoking gun lies right inside the official press release from the local precinct, which clearly verifies that the third casualty was indeed Mr. Brown. He was discovered entirely apart from the main group. Shockingly, as we tape this episode, cops have made 0 arrests, haven't named a single suspect, and the triggerman continues to walk the streets freely. Michael, affectionately known as Mike B, was merely 52, a dedicated dad to 5 kids, and a fiercely ambitious entrepreneur who was just witnessing his culinary businesses hit their absolute zenith. He was just hanging around Suite 100 over on Schaefer Highway when an unknown assailant violently snatched his future away, leaving his relatives to receive that gut-wrenching telephone call mere hours later. Take his sibling Myron, the very same kid, brother whom Mike practically raised single-handedly after they tragically lost their dad when Mike was a mere 5-year-old and Myron barely 12 months old. That devastated sibling eventually had to face the flashing media cameras, sobbing uncontrollably while desperately pleading for any bystanders to finally break their silence. Without a doubt, somebody walking this earth possesses the exact truth about that bloody night on Schaefer Highway, especially since security cameras were actively recording and the other 2 targets actually lived to tell the tale. What bizarre sequence of events leads one of the city's most cherished minority entrepreneurs to a gruesome demise right outside a shady dive bar that was strictly forbidden from operating so incredibly late? Specifically, we are talking about a deadly incident at 4:30 in the morning. Welcome to the baffling mystery surrounding Michael Mike B. Brown. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for Crime Shadows, where we uncover the dark secrets that this frightened metropolis absolutely refuses to whisper in public. At 52 years of age, Michael Brown was absolutely thriving and experiencing the ultimate pinnacle of his personal and professional journey. Serving as a devoted husband and a fiercely protective father of 5, this dynamic business owner had transformed his expanding culinary brand into a staple of the local food and clubbing landscape. Based on heartfelt testimonies shared by his closest relatives and buddies following his tragic murder, this guy was so much more than a mere capitalist trying to make a buck. He was the rare breed of human who literally fed his entire community and ensured every single person felt seen and valued, despite having navigated his own tough childhood streets without a paternal figure. Myron personally verified the heartbreaking reality that they lost their patriarch when the older brother was merely 5 and he himself was barely 1 year old. You simply cannot ignore that piece of history because it perfectly illustrates exactly what forged his character. The kid matured overnight and eagerly took the reins. As his younger sibling proudly recalls, he organically morphed into a paternal guardian, shielding not only his immediate family, but also extending his protective wings over entire surrounding blocks. Long before he ever thought about running a commercial kitchen, this hustler carved out a massive reputation as an elite nightlife event organizer. He mastered the psychological art of sensing a crowd's vibe, creating wildly inclusive environments, and magically transforming a mundane weekday evening into an unforgettable cinematic experience, a skill he sharpened over decades in the gritty local party scene. Eventually, right around 2020, he executed a massive career pivot that fundamentally altered his entire destiny. He boldly launched Sloppy Chops, situated on West McNichols Road, right by the Lodge Freeway, establishing a legitimate high-end steakhouse boasting massive ribeyes, premium tomahawks, and wildly impressive meats. Yet, the genius marketing hook that transformed the spot into an overnight cultural phenomenon was his legendary $2 lamb chop promotion. Folks went absolutely crazy for that specific menu item. Industry insiders actually claimed the massive food distribution hubs down by the Ambassador Bridge struggled daily just to keep those racks stocked. Barely 12 months down the road, he expanded his empire by launching Sloppy Crab over on East Jefferson Avenue right near the iconic Renaissance Center. He eventually rebranded that second location into Crab Sports Bar, intentionally injecting his signature high-energy, club-style aesthetic directly into the city's bustling riverfront district. A-list stars were constantly dropping by, while wildly loyal patrons jammed the floors absolutely every single weekend without fail. Highly decorated reporter Daryl Hudson, who previously profiled this titan for Food and Wine magazine, vividly remembers dialing his number over 20 separate times just to lock down a simple conversation. The man genuinely could not have cared less about media clout because his entire focus was strictly locked on expanding his corporate footprint. Reverend Maurice Mo Hardwick, the visionary behind the Live in Peace initiative, beautifully characterized our victim as an authentic hometown hero, deeply obsessed with empowering his neighbors and elevating the human spirit. The respected clergyman insisted that civic duty wasn't merely a talking point for this entrepreneur, it was literally baked into his daily operations, wildly affordable menu prices, and the very meals he served. You could literally feel the warmth in how he personally greeted folks at the entrance of his establishment, ensuring every single guest felt like an honored visitor in his private living room. Could this pioneer have ever fathomed that the vibrant, pulsating after-dark scene he personally helped construct would ultimately serve as the bloody backdrop where a monster would steal his last breath? Was his intuition screaming that something felt brutally off as the clock agonizingly ticked past 2, then 3, and eventually 4 o'clock in the dead of night? It genuinely begs the question, how does 3 solid decades of relentless hustle and community building abruptly terminate on a cold, unforgiving concrete stretch of Schaefer Highway? Let us break down exactly what the forensic clues reveal so far. Unfortunately, this is precisely the moment the narrative spirals into utter chaos. Unbelievably, at the time of producing this broadcast, the local homicide squad has completely failed to name a single person of interest. They haven't provided any physical descriptions, and absolutely zero handcuffs have been slapped on anyone, while the trigger puller remains a ghost, the terrifying timeline kicking off at exactly 20 past 4 on Saturday morning is crystal clear. On the 28th of February, 2026, gunfire tore through the night at Suite 100, a local lounge located at 15,789 Schaefer Highway over on the west side of Detroit, even though Michigan regulations clearly state that liquor sales must end strictly by 2 in the morning. Establishments are strictly required to lock their doors by 2:30 in the morning. Yet this particular venue kept the party going almost 2 entire hours beyond that strict legal limit. That completely turned the place into an illicit underground club operating completely against the law, right in the middle of a quiet family community. Jasmine Ball, the lead communications officer for the Detroit Police Department, shared some crucial details regarding the incident. Law enforcement received the distress call around 4:30 in the morning, and upon arrival, first responders stepped right into a scattered and chaotic crime scene. They discovered a pair of casualties right near the club entrance, while Mike Brown laid out completely separated on the opposite side of the road, and though the first 2 pulled through, he tragically lost his life. That physical distance is actually a massive detail, considering that people struck in group violence usually end up grouped closely together on the pavement. Discovering him so far away from the rest of the group naturally sparked some heavy suspicions, bringing up a major mystery that detectives are still keeping completely under wraps. Did someone track his movements, or was he the main focus of a hit while the bystanders just caught stray bullets in the crossfire? Maybe he managed to sprint that distance before finally collapsing, but nobody is talking, and absolutely zero bystanders have stepped up to share their story. Meanwhile, the person who pulled the trigger just slipped away from Schaefer Highway into the shadows that dawn, remaining a complete ghost to this very day. Keeping quiet carries its own devastating consequences, especially when you listen to Isaiah Zeke Williams from the grassroots advocacy team known as New Era Detroit. The vast majority of brutal crimes stretching across this town unfold exactly during these sketchy graveyard hours. Witnesses catching these acts are usually hanging out in environments where opening your mouth feels like a direct death sentence. City Council member Angela Whitfield Calloway recently made it clear that officials are about to drop the hammer hard on all these illicit late-night spots. However, those exact safety measures should have been actively protecting the streets the very dawn this tragedy occurred, leaving us wondering who was even hanging around that club at 4 in the morning. Who was lingering by the entrance? What actually sparked the bloodshed? And why is every single person refusing to utter a single sound? Imagine finding yourself right outside Suite 100 when the chaos kicked off. How would you react in that terrifying moment? So let us know your thoughts down below. Going back to Friday evening on the 27th of February, 2026, leading into the following Saturday morning, we know for a fact that the victim was out on the town. He spent his time mingling at Suite 100, a local drinking spot situated right along Schaefer Highway, close to FLE Street. This particular joint blatantly ignored the strict 2:30 curfew mandated for legitimate state venues, and right around 20 past 4 in the morning, brutal shots rang out, with authorities later verifying that 3 individuals took bullets. A couple of the wounded dropped right by the front doors, while our main subject took a hit and collapsed entirely by himself directly opposite the building at 15,789 Schaefer. Medics rushed him away from the scene, yet based on the formal briefing delivered by police representative Jasmine Bama, the outcome was grim. The man discovered completely isolated on the opposite sidewalk, Mikey Brown, tragically lost his battle to survive, making it 3 casualties in a single burst of violence. A pair of unnamed bystanders managed to cheat death, leaving only 1 individual lifeless on the cold pavement. It was absolutely heartbreaking since he dedicated years to uplifting his community, and the venue itself has permanently shut down ever since the tragedy occurred. Detectives haven't found the firearm, they lack any clear reason for the attack, and prosecutors haven't indicted a single soul. Hidden within the echoing blasts and the pitch black sky, the ruthless attacker vanished without leaving a single trace behind. What the emergency crews walked into was definitely not just some accidental brawl gone terribly wrong. This felt like a highly calculated ambush, executed with pinpoint precision, robbing a man of his future while injuring 2 more, making us wonder what went down right before the trigger was pulled. Is there any hidden truth captured on the local security cameras? And how has this tight-lipped community kept everything completely buried for more than 7 days? How did he spend his last agonizing seconds on that pavement? And what caused him to end up so terribly distanced from the rest of the casualties? Local officers answered the emergency dispatch, calling them to the address of 15,789 Schaefer Highway, arriving in the pitch black early hours of February 28th, 2026. Rolling up to the block, the cops stumbled upon a trio of bleeding bodies. A pair right by Suite 100 and the final one isolated across the pavement. But tragically, our main guy never recovered. Detectives from the Major Crimes Task Force alongside the murder squad instantly hit the pavement to hunt for any fresh clues. Authorities have officially labeled this entire probe as an active and developing hunt since day 1. By early March 2026, over 5 full days past the bloodshed, the brass still hasn't dropped any profile of the killer, leaving the holding cells completely empty. City cops are practically begging the neighborhood to step up and share any shred of truth they might hold. They are urging absolutely anybody holding the missing pieces to dial the murder squad straight at 313-596-2260. You can easily drop a ghost tip by calling Crime Stoppers at 1-800-BQP, or simply log on to the web portal at DetroitRewards.tv. His little brother Myron bravely faced the media glare, delivering a gut-wrenching cry for justice that brought the entire metropolis to a standstill. Pleading through the pain, Myron explained how his sibling fed half the block and employed so many, begging the community to finally return the favor and start talking. The younger sibling revealed the tragic history of losing their dad back when the victim was only 5 years of age. That left little Myron as a mere infant, forcing the older brother to practically grow up overnight and play the role of a dad in a broken household. Tragically, his 5 kids are now forced to confront that exact same heartbreaking fate. Detectives are slamming into a massive brick wall, the notorious unspoken rule of keeping quiet about underground late-night spots. Speaking straight to the city council, Williams from New Era Detroit pointed out that most brutal street offenses happen during these dark, twilight hours, leaving bystanders terrified to open their mouths. Murder investigators are currently struggling to break through this deep-rooted culture of absolute secrecy. Several bystanders watched the gunfire unfold right outside a club that had illegally stayed open way past its mandated closing time. There is no doubt somebody witnessed the whole thing, while Suite 100 was forced to lock its doors right after the killing occurred. In response, Councilwoman Calloway declared that serious crackdowns are officially on the horizon. Local advocacy groups like New Era Detroit and Pastor Hardwick's Live in Peace movement, are aggressively pushing for a strict city law that forces businesses in residential areas to shut down earlier. If that kind of rule had actually been on the books and taken seriously, Suite 100 would have been pitch black long before Mike Brown even pulled up. It is absolutely mind-boggling that not a single soul has stepped up to testify, especially after 3 individuals were gunned down outside a joint that was supposed to be completely closed. What does this reveal about the absolute failure of our local nightlife regulations? And more importantly, what dark secrets are hiding on those security tapes? At the exact time of this broadcast, the authorities have yet to slap cuffs on anyone for the brutal assassination of Michael B. Brown, whose killer is still wandering the streets. No official suspects have been named or given a public description, leaving his death completely unavenged. Detectives from the Detroit Police Department are still digging into the case, practically begging the neighborhood to shoulder the burden of solving this crime via nameless hotlines. To honor his legacy, memorial services were spread out over a solemn 2-day period. Loved ones could pay their respects during a viewing held on March 12th, running from 4 o'clock until 7. In the evening, at Kemp Funeral Home and Cremation Services, located at 24,585 Evergreen Road in Southfield, followed by a complete hometown farewell on March 13th at 10 in the morning, over at Triumph Church North Campus on 15,600 J.L. Hudson Drive, also in Southfield. Even before those formal gatherings kicked off, supporters organized a heartfelt balloon release at 12 o'clock on March 8th, right in front of Sloppy Chops on West McNichols Road, which was the very first dining spot he constructed entirely from scratch. His heartbroken yet fiercely determined brother, Myron Brown, painted a picture of him as a deeply loyal husband, an incredible dad, and the absolute only paternal role model he ever knew, especially since they lost their own father when Myron was just 1 and Mike was barely 5 years old. According to Myron, Mike Brown was forced to leave his own 5 kids behind. 5 precious children who are now doomed to grow up without a dad, mirroring his own tragic childhood. The sheer devastation of this tragedy is absolutely suffocating, though the neighborhood immediately rallied together in an awe-inspiring show of solidarity. In just a matter of days following the gunfire, well over 1,000 heartbroken and shocked messages completely overtook Mike's personal Instagram profile. Beautiful homages poured in from other local entrepreneurs, loyal patrons, reporters, and passionate community advocates, along with total strangers who had simply dined at his spots and sensed his genuine soul. Yet the agonizing mystery of who actually fired that weapon and their twisted motives remains unsolved. The facts show that Mike Brown was standing near a nightclub that was breaking the law by staying open a full 2 hours past curfew. It is confirmed that a trio of victims took bullets, and we are painfully aware that Mike tragically bled out by himself on the opposite side of the road. It is a known fact that the monster responsible for this bloodshed has kept quiet, and the bystanders have absolutely refused to hand them over to the cops. There is absolutely zero excuse, petty argument, or hidden agenda that makes it okay to rip a father away from his 5 kids. That toxic silence shielding the shooter is practically a deadly weapon itself. The tragic passing of Mike Brown has violently exposed a much deeper scar across Detroit, shining a blinding light on the wildly unchecked, completely lawless underground scene of late-night joints that thrive in the shadows of quiet neighborhoods without facing a single consequence. People only start caring when a disaster strikes and time runs out, begging the ultimate question: would cracking down on Michigan's 2:30 closing law have actually kept him breathing? Make sure to hit that subscribe button for Crime Shadows, where we dive deep into the very cases that expose our broken system as it crumbles right before our eyes. The deeply moving saga of Michael Mike B. Brown is the ultimate testament to a man who constructed an empire entirely from scratch. Growing up without a dad, a mentor, or a safety net, his existence was snatched away in a heartbeat near a shady spot that should have been locked up tight, proving that the brutal acts destroying legends never give a warning. Evil simply lurks in the pitch black shadows at 4 in the morning, haunting those forgotten corners that somehow dodge police radar. This guy was a real-life hero who fed everyone in his circle, and he was right in the middle of launching his brand new culinary venture. As a proud dad of 5, he intimately knew the pain of losing his own father at age 5, a devastating curse his kids are now forced to inherit. The ruthless triggerman is still walking the streets, the onlookers refuse to make a peep, and the entire city of Detroit is practically begging for a single brave soul to drop a name. How can a community ever stay safe when the very folks who watch a slaughter unfold decide to completely zip their lips? Hit subscribe on our page right now because we fearlessly tackle the gritty mysteries that terrify the mainstream media, diving in while the clues are fresh and actual justice is still on the line. A brutal weekend gunfire incident at a West Side tavern tragically ended the life of beloved restaurateur Mikey Brown, leaving a couple of other patrons wounded. Local authorities are practically begging community members to step up and share any potential clues regarding this horrific crime. Channel 7 Detroit correspondent Randy Wimbley sat down with the grieving sibling while also investigating serious complaints regarding establishments operating way past their curfews. Consider a 52-year-old local culinary pioneer who dedicated 30 years of his life crafting an absolute empire from scratch. He established a pair of dining spots that emerged as sheer beacons of Black success in a community craving inspiration, only to be gunned down outside an illicit after-hours joint at 4:30 in the morning, miles away from his own venues and familiar stomping grounds. This happened right in front of a watering hole that, according to state regulations, absolutely had to be shut down and pitch black 2 solid hours prior. However, the real shocker is the detail the mainstream media completely ignores. Once law enforcement finally rolled up to the scene, they discovered a pair of wounded individuals bleeding out right by the main entrance. That same brother now stands before cameras pleading for a community that Mike fed for decades to finally speak up. The bar where the shooting occurred was operating nearly 2 hours past Michigan's legal 2:30 a.m. closing time. 3 people were shot that night. 2 survived near the entrance. Mike was found alone on the opposite side of the road. That distance is not a small detail. It suggests he may have been targeted separately from the others. Weeks later, no arrests, no suspects, no weapon recovered. The killer is still free. When illegal nightlife is ignored, communities pay the price with lives they cannot get back. Security cameras were rolling that night. Other survivors were present. Someone knows exactly what happened. The silence surrounding crimes at underground venues is a documented crisis, not an excuse. It is a failure of collective protection. Mike Brown fed his block for 30 years. His 5 children now grow up without him, just as he once grew up without his own father. Advocacy groups and council members are now pushing for stricter curfew laws in residential areas. It is too late for Mike. If that law had existed and been enforced, Suite 100 would have been dark long before he ever arrived. Justice delayed is a wound that every person who stays silent chooses to keep open. If you have information about the murder of Michael Brown, contact Detroit Homicide at 313-596-2260 or Crime Stoppers at 180-0-SPEAKUP. Mike Brown built something real from nothing. His story deserves an ending that honors what he gave this city. A successful Detroit restaurateur was shot and killed outside an illegal after-hours bar at 4:30 a.m. Michael Mike B. Brown was 52 years old, a husband, a father of 5, and a pillar of his community. He built 2 thriving restaurants from nothing, fed his neighbors, and employed people who had nowhere else to turn. He grew up without a father, losing him at age 5, and raised his own brother Myron from infancy.